like she's on
the
the
screen. You're muted, Ms. Hennessey. Oh, we can't hear you.
There.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You're here to, let me find your volunteer. You are here to volunteer to be on the Extension Committee. And the way this works is you tell us a little bit about yourself. It's very informal. You tell us a little bit about yourself and why you would like to be on the Extension Committee. At the end of this board meeting, we usually will take a vote about whether you are accepted into that position, and we will send you a notice about that.
Okay.
Okay?
My name is Victoria Hennessey. I have been a citizen of Rochester and Olmsted County for most of my life. I started gardening back in the 80s, I suppose, and have gone through most of the appropriate horticulture programs to gain more knowledge in my quest to be a great gardener, which not always happens. I am a retired emeritus master gardener. I also am a member of the Rochester Flower and Garden Club. I am a member of the local hosta group, and I do a considerable amount of volunteer work now at the Smart Garden at the Heinz Center because they've lost their horticulture program. And we are currently trying to, or we are organizing a totally volunteer program to maintain that garden. So I put a lot of hours in there. I've worked in horticulture settings periodically over my gardening career. I spent 40 years working in a health-related field and working in horticulture. I maintain pretty much a 2-acre garden right now, which is starting to look a little better now that we've had some rain. My reasons for trying to become one of the Extension Committee members is I did serve on the Extension Committee years ago, probably more than 20 years ago. And I think my presence or a horticultural volunteer presence would be a good addition to that committee. I think the outreach that the master gardeners have within the community and our garden clubs, local garden clubs, need a voice. So those are kind of the reasons I've come to apply for this position.
Welcome back. Do we have any comments or questions for Ms. Hennessey?
Certainly sounds like she has experience that'll be very relevant for the committee.
Can you repeat that, Commissioner Cascade?
I just said it certainly sounds, Ms. Hennessey, like you have experience that'll be very relevant for the Extension Committee.
Yes. Can we see your thumbs?
Yeah, the green.
Just wondering if you have a green thumb.
They're not green. They're black.
Kind of a really good gardener.
Well,
did you have something to say?
No, but I do think that the gardeners who are helping immigrants and people that are not familiar with gardening to grow fruits and vegetables are very helpful because it does also help resolve some of the food issues that some of these families have. And of course, everybody knows that we ought to eat more fruits and vegetables. So thank you very much for that, Ms. Hennessey.
Need some hostas. My wife's dividing 1 million of them last night, although I think her sisters, Jean and Joan, took a bunch of them. So if you need hostas, we got 5 million of them at our house.
Okay.
Well, we have a concern right now with jumping worms, and we're trying to mitigate that problem. It's just another kind of problem that we keep talking about, that and water quality. And like the commissioner stated, food insecurity is another thing we're dealing with.
Thank you. Thank you. There's no more questions for you. Thank you for presenting yourself to be on this committee, and we'll get back to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Osborne, you are applying for the Public Health Advisory Board, Community Service Advisory Board.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, I'm interested in participating in the Public Health Service Advisory Board. Briefly, I've been engaged in healthcare operations and operations management for the last 17 years in a variety of settings, and have worked in emergency management, emergency preparedness, healthcare delivery in a variety of locations, as well as at the local and at the national level across that time. And so bring experience with financial management, organizational management, healthcare delivery, as well as engagement in things like injury prevention from trauma, public health testing and laboratory testing, hospital care, as well as preparedness and response that seems relevant at this point to help provide input to the health department.
Well, that is a long list of wonderful qualifications to be on that board. Are there any questions for Mr. Osborne? No. Good. Thank you for applying,
You're
and
welcome.
we will get right back. We will get back to you this week.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, we will now call to order the Olmsted County Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, September 7th, 2021, and we will start with a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will now move on to the consent agenda. Approve the minutes from the July 17th, 2021 County Board meeting. Proclaim September 10th through the 19th as Olmsted County Welcoming Week. And there are a lot of events going on that are scheduled for that. Proclaim September 12th through the 19th as Direct Support Professional Recognition Week. Accept the 2022 to 2023 Radiological Emergency Preparedness Grant Award. Authorize the Reading Center budget to be supplied to the Minnesota State Department of Education and the Minnesota Management and Budget. Approve final payment for contract CT 20116R. Furnish and install OWEF air compressor. Approve the 2022 to 23 law enforcement contracts. Accept WIC Peer Breastfeeding Support Grant Award. Award contract for County Project C-21-CPR. Approve Local Road Improvement Program Grant Agreement. Award contract for County Project C-21-02 for CASA 2. Award contract to Schwab LLC, contract number 2021-103.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Move now to our board decision items.
Madam Chair, if I might, could I request that we take 4C first? We have many staff here from Soil and Water, and I think it's a shorter item, and Pete and I are thinking we could cut staff loose if we do them first. Would you take 4C first?
All right, we will move to 4C first, Administrator's Showcase, Soil and Water Conservation District, SWCD.
Good morning,
Morning,
Commissioners. Kay Beniak, Physical Development. As you know, we've been highlighting through Heidi and our administration some of our maybe lesser publicized, lesser in the forefront kind of groups that do a ton of work. So today we have our Soil and Water Conservation District here with us today. While the group might be small, they're super mighty in everything that they do. So Skip will give you a little bit of background information on some of their activities and introduce our group for you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Morning, Skip.
Morning, Commissioners. Have some Olmsted Soil and Water Conservation staff here with me today. We are part of 88 soil and water conservation districts here in the state of Minnesota. The soil and water conservation districts were born basically in the 1930s out of the Dust Bowl when, due to drought conditions, maybe more severe than we have this year, but not unlike this year. We had soil from the Great Plains blowing all the way to Washington, D.C. So our first soil and water conservation district in the state of Minnesota was the Burns, Homer, Pleasant, which is now Winona Soil and Water Conservation District. And Olmsted's district was created in 1947. So next year we'll observe our 75th anniversary operating as a district. We are a 103C entity, and so there is a soil and water conservation district law in the state of Minnesota that kind of governs the operations and activities of the district. We have 5 elected board members, not unlike yourself. They have a constituency that overlaps with yours and are there and working on their behalf. And we work on behalf of our soil and water conservation district supervisors and you all as county commissioners, and of course all of our county residents. Probably one of the main things about soil and water districts is that we are a locally led conservation operation. We work right here in Olmsted County, and we work on private lands. So that's something that probably a lot of the other departments within Olmsted County can't necessarily say or claim, but we work with private landowners on private lands to get projects done that help improve water quality, prevent soil loss and erosion, and improve the environment in general. Our funding primarily comes from local resources such as Olmsted County, but also through the state. We work with Board of Water and Soil Resources, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Health, and others, as well as our USDA partners, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So today, I guess I'd just like to invite staff to come on up and introduce them to you. We got a hard-working bunch. Caitlin Brady is our Water Resources Coordinator. Started back in the days of Terry Lee, of course, everybody knows Terry, and has done just a wonderful job of carrying on the work that he was involved in as our water planner, overseeing some of the one watershed, one plan work that we're doing now, big buzzword that you're all aware of, as well as the groundwater, things relating to drinking water and the health of our groundwater resources. So she's an integral part of our team and kind of newer to the Soil and Water District, but not to Olmsted County. Martin Larson is a soil conservation technician who also works as our feedlot technician, does just an unbelievable job in that realm, but also has become kind of a groundwater guru with his, caving expertise and background now. We appreciate that. Rosalind Davis is with us for the summer. She's our summer intern, so we're happy to have her here helping out our team to get a little extra work done this season. Angela White has been with us for a number of years now, and actually we were colleagues way back under the Zumbro Watershed Partnership, and then she worked with the Natural Resources Conservation Service on the federal level, and then we pulled her over to our team a number of years ago, and she just does a tremendous job on the education side of things, has great capabilities in the field with designing and engineering practices, and does a wonderful job for the district. Aaron Gam is probably one of our our newer staff. Came to us. He has experience up with the city of St. Cloud, and then was in Mauer SWCD for a short time, and now has joined Olmsted Soil and Water Conservation District. And he does our easement programs and works with landowners on prairie restorations and tree plantings. He's helped us get our new native plant and seed sale on the ground, working also in our One Water, One Plan, and then also building best management practices out on the landscape. We had a couple that weren't able to be here today. Scott Bennett is another soil conservation technician that helps us get he's been here for many years, back in the mid 2000s, I think is when he started, and really is one of our leaders in putting practices on the landscape. He takes on our precipitation network program. And then Mark Ritt was going to be here too, but had another obligation. And he works with the Minnesota Department of Ag, but is our agricultural certification specialist. So he works under the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program to ensure that farmers that are managing their farms in a way that they can be certified, get certified. So in Olmsted County, we're one of the leaders in the state with certifications. And I think that goes to show that the work that these guys have done over the years is really laying the foundation for programs like that to be successful. So anyway, I'm Skip Langer and glad to be here today.
Thanks, Skip.
Skip, you've been a wonderful leader and all that. I have something for you here. It's covered with dust from the Dust Bowl, I'm sure. I have a very old soil survey of Olmsted County. Maybe you'll find interesting reading.
To be honest, that my book looks a lot worse for wear, and it does get used every day. Of course, now we have thank you. Now we have a digital version of the soil survey, of course. So everything's through GIS, but I tell you, this is a great resource. Some of you probably know George Polk, maybe you know Steve Lawler in the county. They both worked on this Olmsted County survey during the 70s, and it was published in 1980. So has just as much value as it did then today. So.
Right. Yeah, some of the old stuff is very helpful. And before digitalization, I passed on to you the pictures of the Zumbro Lake that they took before I think the dam was put in, and shows the silting process of what's happened before that. So it helps us plan for the future. But I'm very appreciative of the work that the Soil and Water does. And I might suggest to you that your days of flying under the radar without too much people looking at what you do might be over, because of the focus that there is now on water quality, groundwater quality, drinking water quality, and so that your presence and the information that's coming from your office is probably going to be raised as far as public awareness. So thank you. You're well prepared for that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming in.
I think we will go back to the first item, the board priority updates to provide operational excellence. And is that going to be Deb? Bring us to that?
Looks like Heidi just punted that one over to.
Commissioners. This is the very last of the mid-year updates for the 2021 board year priorities. And we've just made it before the fourth quarter, so we are at the tail end of mid-year, as it were. But this will be the rest of the provide operational excellence priorities. So we'll start with Mr. Curry from Human Resources, and you'll hear from a variety of us today. I believe that Mr. Peabody is virtual because he's out of the office, so just be aware of that. Thanks.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Julian Curry, Human Resource Director. So am I clicking this? Or? All right, so I wanted to highlight a couple of initiatives that we're working on this year, starting with our high fives. Recently, starting the first of the year, we made some changes to our evaluation performance process. Where we went from one program to another program as we're trying to streamline our programs a little bit, use less systems, make it easier for our supervisors as well as our employees. We also went from 8 competencies down to 5, and those are your 5 competencies that are listed there. We're making it a lot easier for supervisors. One thing that we were struggling with is getting reviews done timely. Which is very appreciative by employees as we're trying to retain our employees. They want the feedback, and as you know, that our performance reviews come along with a merit increase. So we wanted to improve that turnaround time. So shortening that process for the supervisors, making it easier for them. So we reduced our competencies from 8 to 5, and then we also highlighted some key values within the organization. So that's kind of what you see under the bullet points there, our focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So some information about the performance of the High Fives initiative this year. We have seen a drastic improvement in completing of evaluations. For year to date, we have completed 60% of the evaluations, so we're right on pace for the most part, being that we are 3/4 into the year. We have had over 800 evaluations completed year to date, actually. We have about 40 evaluations that are in process, slightly overdue, but we are working with those supervisors and departments to get those completed. The one good thing about the new program, we have over 3,000 journal entries that have been put on the system. Those journal entries can come from employees on behalf of other employees, can come from supervisors on behalf of their employees, and it can cross departments. Those are highlighting performance by certain individuals. So it's notes that can be added to individuals' profiles throughout the year to help with that evaluation at the end of the year. And as you know, we went from 3 ratings down to 2, so that's been an adjustment for some of our staff. But year to date, we are showing that about 70% of our staff that have received evaluations have received and exceed expectations, and the other 30% have received or meets expectations. Okay. So the second initiative I wanted to talk about was our compensation study. So we kicked off a compensation study in June of this year. So we are deep into it, still collecting data, but this study is to examine our compensation and classification system throughout the organization. We want to make sure that our system truly reflects the work that our employees are doing, while also allowing us flexibility to effectively attract and retain our staff by making sure we administer an equitable system throughout the organization. So SOAR is kind of what our branding name is that we'll be launching here in a couple of months. Once we collect the data and bring bring more of those that information back to the county board. So service is what we're here to do throughout the organization, and optimize. We're looking to optimize our compensation program through the way we administer, to utilize the tools that we have in place and administer it throughout the organization. Ultimately, it is to attract and retain high quality staff. So our SOAR objectives, key objectives of this project is to ensure that all of our jobs are classified appropriately and meet FLSA guidelines. We want to stay compliant, stay out of legal trouble, of course. But it also ensure that our pay is competitive and equitable across the organization structurally. So we're also looking at reviewing our policies and procedures on how we administer the compensation and making sure that's aligned and giving us the ability to pivot at any time as well. So system is keeping the system up to date. So we hope to develop a compensation system that is easily to understand by all as well as to administer. So the one thing we did just implement, probably effect as of July 1st, is that HR is moving forward, is making all job offers to both internal and external candidates. So internally, we have a committee within HR that gets together and reviews any offers that need to be made, and we review all similar staff that are in similar positions, review their salaries in comparison to the candidate's experience, and try and make sure we slot them in accordingly. Of course, this is in collaboration with the hiring manager, so throughout the process. So like I said, we're about 2 or 3 months into this new process, and it is going fairly well. So I think HR has made probably about 30 offers since about July 1st.
Gotcha. Mr. Kerr, does that mean that HR makes the offer directly to the prospective employee and not the hiring manager?
What's that now?
Does that mean that HR staff makes the offer directly to the prospect and not the hiring manager?
That is correct. So, like I said, we work with the hiring manager as we strategize on what the offer should be. But yes, HR is making the offer, so we are able to go over the actual pay, salary, but then go into greater details about the benefits that we are offering, basically to make sure that that candidate has the complete picture in order to make the best decision for them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I am going to turn it over to Wilfredo.
I have some questions.
Sure. Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I'm really happy to hear that over 70% or exceed expectations. I mean, I think that that really speaks well to the workforce in Olmsted and to the employees who really are dedicated to serving the people of the county. What would you say is the highlights of the benefit package that we have available to attract and retain employees?
What do we have? Where's our advantage lie?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's the work that we do. I'm going to rely on that, us serving our community, impacting the lives of our citizens is first and foremost. And then from there is the individuals that you work alongside, from your staff colleagues all the way up to the management and the support they provide. So I'm going to start there and then go into our benefits. When you talk about our retirement plans, our PARA, that is something that not many other organizations in our area are able to offer. To our competitive medical and dental benefits. Our leave program is probably top notch. The amount of PTO and personal time, as well as the vacation or the holiday schedule. So I can keep going, Commissioner
Yeah.
Wright.
No, I appreciate that.
I mean,
Those are the
that's-
top three, I
Yep.
would say.
So that's one thing why we were welcome the opportunity to be able to make the offers. So we can, we've been trained in this. I'm training my staff ongoing that we are able to better present the county when we're talking to candidates. Our next step is to be able to do that before they become candidates, to get our story out to the community, to the surrounding areas as we try and boost up our target, our candidate pool.
Well, it's to the benefit of the personnel office that you've taken the lead in that. Appreciate that. And my understanding is that you're also working very diligently on increasing the diversity because of future employees, very likely, will come from a very diverse background.
That is very correct. So this year we started this year we were at about 8% countywide, and that varies from department to department. Our goal this year was to be at 10%. We know that recruitment and hiring has kind of slowed a little bit just because we're still dealing with the pandemic, but we have made some strides to maintain and even increase that number. I believe year to date we're about 9%. So we want to continue to elevate that number. I believe we'll be setting the goal next year, another 11, another couple of percentage points, 12%. I know we have the goal of being up to 13% in 2023. So we want to continue to make those efforts, and that's going to be that we're going to have to go out and find the individuals.
Okay, good. And my understanding is also that we have working on a long-term project which would involve the Career Academy to look at young people that are still in high school that eventually will be choosing careers.
Yes.
And so I appreciate the fact that you've been working on that as well, because an investment will pay off.
Yes, so that's going to continue to be worked on, working with Hawthorne, as you guys know, with eligibility specialists specifically, or clerical support staff, and we're going to start the project with workforce development to grow those efforts, expand those even further, and like Commissioner Wright mentioned, kind of reach out to some of the high school students that are still unknown about their direction after high school.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
So good morning, Commissioners. Wilfredo Romancadala, Chief Financial Officer. One of the other priorities for the board is what we have labeled the hub, or branded the hub. That is our financial and human resources system. And just before I jump into it, there were three very specific components of this particular project that we embarked into. One was, we needed to modernize our financials in an HR system, but we needed to do it in a way that it was meaningful. So in order to not only we modernize the system, we also took the opportunity to improve processes as we are modernizing the system. And then we took a very, very specific people-focused approach in change management to help people understand the process. So those are the three areas that I'm going to discuss with you this morning. So first one is software modernization. And there's a number of things that we did in order to modernize the system. But the main focus is we want it to be not only an effective process, but also an efficient process, and making sure that people were going to the hub, the central repository of information, after searching for insight, and then be able to make decisions. So a few things that we've done already that are available now is the employee self-service. That specific area is open to every single employee and you as commissioners, where you can search information about your pay stubs, you can search information W-2s, if there are life-changing events, a child, a dependent, things like that, you can go through that hub and make those particular adjustments. rather than trying to find a specific form like we used in the past, fill out the form, then who do I send this form to, who's going to be responsible to follow up. Now everything is into that central repository of information in its workflow appropriately. Everything start in a digital form and stay in the digital form, rather than start on paper and then convert it. We have HR management, benefits and payroll and things like that, which we have always have. We just have modernized those tools. We also have modernized our financial system, accounting system, budgeting, position control. This position control became a very important tool for us as we are now wanting to start be able to identify what is happening with positions that we move through the year. What have changed, what have added, modified. Our positions are open, our positions filled, for how long they've been open, what are the savings related to that particular position. So things like that now are going to become easier. And one of the components that we have used we're going to start using is cost accounting for projects and grants. That makes it very useful to having a central repository, what is happening to the cost of a particular project or grant, and then what is happening with the revenue associated with that particular project or grant. So when you have questions, we should be able, moving forward, to identify project X, these are the different costs, these are the different revenue streams to that particular project, rather than relying on a number of Excel worksheets and trying to get the information for a number of different locations and accountants. We have everything, eventually everything will be in the hub, in that central repository. And then we have adopted Power BI. Is a Microsoft tool that will help us show not only data, but also data in a visualized form. That means using graphs and different forms that easily digestible information for us as accounting employees, for you as leader of the organization as well. And then coming soon, pretty soon we'll have open enrollment for benefits. That will be also embedded into the hub. Personal action requests, every time there's a change, somebody retired, leaves the organization, everything will flow in a seamless process as well that is electronic. The procurement component is now going to be pretty much from the ground up. We never had a procurement process that was digitized in a way through the system. It was all paper based. Now we're moving really from ground zero into a procurement system that is electronic eventually down the road. Particularly, we have started with the help of facilities and building operations to test the waters with purchase orders and how that information relates back to the managers making decisions. And then eventually we'll have a manager self-service, just like we have employee self-service, where the manager will go and find information about human resources in financial data so they can make decisions. And down the road, we'll have cost allocation, which will replace some of our internal service funds, and then eventually we'll have vendor self-service. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop here for a second, just in case you have questions or would like to ask about the actual modernization. Otherwise, I'll keep moving forward. Yep. Like I said before, a key component is process improvement. We're modernizing a process, but at the same time, a tool, we're modernizing the process associated with that modernized tool, and we have been able to do that. That's where the really bang for our buck will come, where we can say, yes, we have a new modernized tool, but we're going to use it in a different way so we become more effective and more efficient. And finally, we have this change management component. I think this is the most critical component of all the three because it's the human relations aspect of things. We can change a process, we can modernize a system, but we cannot help people understand why we're making the changes and why those changes are beneficial to them, then we haven't accomplished much. So, like I said before, this is a very people-focused process. We have put together teams of individuals that work together representing each department in addition to the project team, because these individuals, what we have called the change network, they're kind of the face of the process improvement, the new modernization from the lens of the department. Each department has a change network agent, and their role is to be the communication conduit of what specific information or challenges present at the department level to the project team. and then we can make adjustments as needed. So I thought that was one of the most significant things we have done in the project is making sure people at the department level are involved, and we have that communication back and forth. We have regular communications thanks to the communications team. We have ongoing communication, and then those communications are housed in a central repository as well, so people can go back in time and say, well, did we ever talk about this? Yes, let's refer back to this particular page, this particular time when we talk about this particular concept. And then people can go back in time to it, because as you know, we tend to forget. There's a lot of things happening through the year. So it's good to refer people back to those communication events after the fact. One of the critical component of this have been the readiness assessments and reviews. So basically, we have asked questions at the department level. Do you know where you could find information about this particular new tool? Do you understand how to use the tool? Do you know who your change agent is, and things like that? And we have branded that the Get to Green plan. So as we start assessing information, people say, well, really, I don't know this, or I'm not sure where that is. So we label those answers kind of in a red type of environment. And then we say, as people are starting understanding that better, we say, now we're getting to the green place, to the go place. So Get to the Green plan has been very significant. And basically what it is that when we are in the green stage, people understand the role, they understand why the change is needed, and they understand their actions are needed as well. And then most importantly as well is training. We have a wonderful organizational development team that is helping us develop training so people feel confident that they can use the new system and the new tools available to them. And that's it for me. Unless you have questions, I think I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Peabody.
Thanks, Wilfredo.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Hi, Board. Matt Peabody, Director of ITS here. Sorry for the odd way I'm presenting, but I'm in the car. So, as you saw,
Hopefully you're not driving.
I am not. That is against policy. You can see I'm on the passenger side. So, as you can see, that one of our board priorities was the software, kind of trying to minimize the purchase of that software. Have a couple examples of things that we've done over this past year. As you heard Wilfredo talk about Power BI, you're going to see a lot of those coming in pretty soon here, where it's really good visualizations and really a good way to relate information to all of you. Another one on there was Microsoft Forms. You might have seen these on some of the surveys that we're sending out. Really trying to standardize on that piece of software. And that was actually part of our Microsoft suite. So that's one of the things about this priority is we want to try to use the investment that we've already made in many of our tools, rather than purchasing new tools to do the same thing that we already have. Third there is Global Protect. So here, a few of you that are using our devices probably noticed that this moved over to from F5 to Global Protect. They're again utilizing a piece of our software, making it a better experience for our users when we moved people over. Finally on there is OneDrive and Teams. As you all know, for meetings, we also use this for all of our document storage. So we've moved a lot of our document storage over to Teams from SharePoint, and that's really allowed our departments to collaborate with each other very well and to really collaborate even outside of there. I know it was crucial during our COVID response to allow that collaboration between Olmsted County, Olmsted Medical Center, and Mayo for all of that collaboration there. Finally, just a couple updates on what we're planning on doing. As you heard Wilfredo talk about the procurement piece of the hub, we're partnering with finance to go through and make sure that there are appropriate measures in place, reviews for software coming in. And then we're also developing part of that software acquisition process within our own ticketing system. So then that will flow properly from the procurement all the way through to have it installed on PC very smoothly for all of our users. Any questions for me?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Deborah Miller. I'm with Policy Analysis and Communications. I'll give you just a brief highlight on the next board priority, which is on remote work. As you can see, the language that we had for this priority is to codify the COVID learnings on telecommuting to address long-range facility planning and our building footprint, which includes the Justice Tower. So first I want to say that we fully recognize that not all business lines in Olmsted County are going to be conducive to remote work, and so therefore not all employees are going to be eligible to do that type of work. But COVID and the stay-at-home order last spring really supercharged, jump-started what we needed to do in order to accommodate and make sure that the business needs of the county were still being met with a significant portion of our employees working from home. And so we have learned a lot through the pandemic and are now transitioning that into what we can do long term. So a few things, we have done some multiple surveys, both from the employee angle as well as from the perspective of supervisors, to see how things are working with remote work. We've also done additional surveys to all employees that look at effective communications and wellness. That's a little more specific to COVID, but also touches on how things are working when you're being forced to do so remotely. So out of this, we've learned a lot of things, but I've put just a couple of the key findings. Many employees do appreciate the opportunity and they feel both connected and productive. Many people have said I have far fewer distractions actually at home than I do, especially when you're working in a cube environment and lots of people are on the phone or coming and going. People have felt very productive. We have some opportunities to make hybrid meetings more effective through both the technology itself and then also facilitation. It's hard to do things well when you're facilitating both remotely and in person. So that's something that we're still learning. And I know myself as a user, still getting to know the technology in the conference rooms is a bit challenging. So for this to really work long term, we definitely still have some training and capacity needs to look at. We also, from the supervisor perspective, learned that supervisors are supportive of remote work in general, where it's appropriate and it's feasible, as we mentioned, but they also have questions and need support. How do we foster team engagement? How do we ensure performance? Those types of questions. So really working with human resources in particular, and Neil Dennison in the organizational development role, he's been talking about this a lot on his monthly supervisor calls about the unique situation that you're in as a supervisor who is not in daily physical contact with employees. So our current phase of remote work is that a package of materials has been shared with supervisors this summer, and this will help them be equipped to assess the feasibility for long term. Not everything is going to stay exactly the way it has been throughout the COVID pandemic, but some things we anticipate will remain. So some of the tools include a revised policy. The telecommuting policy existed but hadn't been updated in many, many years. And then along with the policy is an agreement form. And the idea is that the agreement form would be signed annually by the supervisor and the employee to say, this is what our understanding of your specific remote work situation is, how many days, what the expectations are unique to that person. We also have a tool that helps the supervisors assess the number of days that each person would be working remotely, and then what are the related space and equipment implications of that. So if you're going to be entirely remote, what do you need to be successful in that environment versus if you're coming in some days of the week, can you, for example, share space with another employee so that we're both reducing our footprint and then also have that flexibility of remote work. And then, as I mentioned, ongoing resources. There's a team site set up for supervisors with all kinds of information and best practices we're learning about how to be successful when you're supervising remotely as well as for employees. And then the departments are being asked to submit their initial plans by the end of September, and from there, then Matt Miller and his team in facilities and building operations, as well as a multi-departmental group, will be taking a look at what are the space implications for the county based on how many people we think will be doing at least part-time remote work, and then sharing spaces when they're in the office or using landing pads. So we're still in the middle of the process, but I would say that we've completed the first phase, which was really that assessment and the policy rewriting that needed to happen in order to be able to even get to this next phase of the work. So Matt Miller's going to continue this conversation with just a little bit of more of an update on the Justice Tower piece. But is there any question for me about this process?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you very much.
Right.
I realize that going distance was very much of a necessity, but in the corporate world there is disagreement on whether that should be continued or not. And I read both sides of those issues. I don't know if it's been resolved. Are we doing a study or any kind of measure that would indicate that our productivity has decreased, increased, or stayed the same? And then, of course, we're working with veteran employees. And I guess my other question would be, how do we know that when new employees arrive that have not worked in an office environment and receive the benefit of experience from other people, how do we know that this is going to continue to provide us what we need in the future?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Wright, I'm not sure I have all the answers to your questions. It's obviously still evolving, but in terms of measurement, that was one of the questions we asked supervisors, was how comfortable they felt with productivity. Overall, there were not significant concerns that productivity had gone down. In some places, as I mentioned, it seemed like with fewer distractions and not being in the office, that productivity actually increased, but it's also always a one-on-one unique situation for each employee as well. So that's part of the assessment tool, is not just can your job be done remotely, but is it a good fit for you as an individual? And that's part of what that agreement form is for. So I might be doing the same job as someone else, but if it simply doesn't work as well for me and my productivity, then that's part of the conversation with the supervisors, which situation is best for each employee. So that's part of the work that we're doing. And then also, as I mentioned, employee assessment too, of whether that works for them. Some people loved being at home, and some people really said, I really miss the work environment. And so trying to take into account those preferences and understanding of their own style as well, to be able to do the best work that they can. I do know that Dakota County did some assessment. They were trying to do an assessment of productivity across the whole county. It's very complicated because, of course, there's many different business lines and productivity is measured so differently. But we do have the results of what they were working on, and so we'll be implementing some of those as well, trying to think through what are the different ways that we can measure productivity moving forward.
Madam Chair?
Oh,
if I could add to that answer, please, for Commissioner Wright, he brings up a lot of good points that we are continually evaluating across the organization. I would add a few points that there are some units for which substantial remote working was already part of their model before the pandemic, and they had developed ways to measure that productivity, and so that continues. For example, on FSA, we know what the caseload should be and how much in that case we expected more of a caseload, a higher productivity when people agreed to work from home. And we are constantly monitoring that and talking to not just the directors, but it's really the supervisors of our smallest, kind of breaking down to our smallest units that need to be paying attention to that. As Deb said, it's both at a unit level, but there's also this individual question, because some people don't want to work remotely, and that's fine. And some people want to work remotely, but they're not a good fit because they're too distracted by whatever it is. So those people wouldn't be candidates to be. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about your good question about what about people that are brand new. And I think that depends a little bit about how that culture has evolved. We're kind of, collectively, we're breaking new ground. You're right, there's opinions everywhere about what's going to work well. At the same time that I really think our society's changing a little bit, in part because of the pandemic, so that there's such a greater acceptance of working online. I wonder if I could turn Wilfredo, who happens to be right here, Wilfredo and Mr. Peabody, who probably isn't done anymore, maybe they both have departments that are almost entirely, IT has a few units that are still in office most of the time, but finance is almost entirely working remotely and has been, and has some examples of all of those kind of nuances that you brought up, and we're working through them one by one. And I wonder if, Wilfred, if you just want to comment to the board about how that is going from finance perspective, what kinds of things you're paying attention to, and how you are thinking about this from the perspective of when you have new staff.
Okay, so let me start with your first question. I think was related to productivity. So just to give you a glance, I just mentioned to you all the great work we've done with the hub. Um, Without adding staff and actually being down staff because of a number of reasons, we put just finance alone put 15,000 hours over the last 20 months um, to make that work. And in the process, we managed to continue to issue bonds with AAA ratings. We managed to have budgets done on time. We managed to have our comprehensive financial annual report done on time and received the Excellence Certificate Award from the GFOA. So those are just a few examples to talk to you about productivity. To the extent that I think we have overworked our staff. I have overworked our staff during that process because not only we were down, we managed to produce extremely valuable, effective amount of work without creating additional costs to the county because most of my staff are salary employees. So that's item one. When it comes down to management, I have been using since 2018 a tool called Office Vive. And Office Vive sends a weekly engagement questionnaires to my staff, asking them about how do they feel about working for Olmsted County, what is their situation. There's 10 engagement metrics, wellness, a relationship with supervisor, relationship with peers. And interestingly enough, during the pandemic, we were working from home, and those metrics went up, meaning they were engaged, they were feeling happier, they were feeling more engaged with their coworkers and supervisors and so forth. So I have an actual measure for us to share. And I have at least 4 employees who started during the pandemic who are performing at a very high level, exceeding expectations, and being very productive.
They were new.
They were new during the pandemic. So I have people that have never been physically or then for orientation on the occasional meeting working from an office. And during that time, I have individuals who the whole time were from an office because they did not, with their remote location where they live, they have no internet. So they were required to be the only ones at the office. And I have a few of those.
And I would add just one more observation that I've had about this in general. People will follow great leaders, and it crosses that situation of are they in person or are they remote, and I think that's more important, honestly. It's not that we ignore what's best for, you gotta continually monitor what's best for individuals, but when I think about this example of Wilfredo's group, he's gonna feel embarrassed that I'm saying this, but he's a fantastic leader. People will follow him. His team adores him, and they will follow him, and they will make it a fantastic experience. No matter, it's just a good example. If we had of course, we don't have any directors that are anything less than fantastic. But if we did have a supervisor or somebody that was not great, the experience for that team is not great if they're online or if they're in person. And so I would say overall, we continue to focus on developing great leaders and then being flexible and nimble about what does that mean about their work location and a variety of other things about teams, but that continues to be what the primary important piece of building teams is having a great leader. So, and thank you for letting me expound on that.
Commissioner Wright, let me just add one more thing. Also, what I've been hearing from my staff is rather than driving 45 minutes to work and driving 45 minutes back to their homes, that time they use it either more productively focus on work or a wellness challenge for themselves. So those are 2 key components as well.
I appreciate the answers, and I think that it's kind of comforting to know the information that you've provided. but I'd still like to have a note of concern for myself and for the organization that the culture will change because we are making a significant change in how we've operated. And it's really important that we continue to monitor that, especially with new employees coming in, because they don't have the advantage of hearing in person the experience of people that are around them and how they've solved problems, and probably more important with the people, the new employees that work with clients one-on-one about how to go about that and a problem that they've had and how to resolve that. So,
Yes,
I appreciate everything that's being done, but we still need to monitor. Thank you.
I totally agree, Madam Chair. If I could just add one more thing. I very much agree with what Commissioner Wright is saying, and it kind of goes back to, it depends what that team is doing, and it depends what the culture of that team is. Just to draw a different example, I've got Travis sitting here behind, and who can maybe speak to, it's a very different situation in some of our line departments. There are some people for whom that makes sense. FSA is a department example where that type of work lends itself well. But just as Commissioner Wright said, there are other types of work that don't lend itself as well. I mean, we can do it in a pinch. For example, some of the corrections work and some of the work that's being done in AFS. Part of that is not only what's best for clients, but what is the status of that team right now? How healthy is that team? What kind of culture change is needed in that team? And because of that, we have some examples where specifically we've said, no, people need to be in the office. Travis, would you like to just say any more about that? I think it's kind of nice for the commissioners to get a little example.
Yeah, well, and I'll try to be brief. I mean, I think, as Wilfredo was describing how it's working for his department, the one thing that he made mention of multiple times was that they met the customer's needs, right? That they've been able to meet the customer's needs by working in the way that they are. And we felt in a lot of the human services areas like we're not able to meet the customer needs if we're not in person, or we're not able to meet their needs to the standard at which we might become accustomed to meeting their needs, right? And so, to your point exactly, Commissioner Wright, there are scenarios where, yeah, we do the work better in person. And if we're here to serve the community, then we need to make sure that that's maintained as our number one goal here. How do we best serve the customer? So we will definitely keep that in mind.
Chair, Commissioners, any other questions on this priority?
Madam Chair, I do believe Matt Peabody has some information you'd like to share. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm still on the meeting. Thank you all. Just wanted to add one more thing. We actually just hired an employee a few weeks ago, and one of the things we actually instituted was a mentorship program. So we had that new employee actually sit and shadow each of our people that were in the same job description for a week. And that was a new thing that we did because he and many of his coworkers were done remotely. That was something we had not done before. So for new employees, we've actually seen a change in the culture that seems to be better. And that employee was actually very thankful because his last employer had forced him to go home. And so our flexible work options for him, he's now working hybrid, partially in the office, partially at home. And that's the way that he prefers it. So getting back to we can retain employees very well and institute a couple of things that are better for those employees throughout this. And as for productivity, there it's many of his applications actually aren't even in the data center. So keeping them here would provide no benefit, and it's really just the same working from remotely as it is in the office. So hear your concern though, and know that, yep, we are keeping track of all of these. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
Moving on, Commissioners, Matt Miller, Director of Facilities and Building Operations. A component of this remote work goal is to look at our justice-based work. And one of the things that we've chosen not to codify is physical distancing. So when we think about justice-based work, we're looking at building another felony-sized courtroom and spaces to support that. So I can feel Graham looking at me right now. We're not planning for the next pandemic. So we're thinking about it and we're being planful about it as to what measures we might have to put in place. And things that we learned through the pandemic is appropriately sized jury assembly space, appropriately sized jury deliberation space, but not necessarily oversizing a courtroom to be able to accommodate physical distancing. So those are some of the things that we are codifying and some that we aren't. So on the justice space project specifically, we just completed design development. That's basically the second phase of developing construction documents. We expect an updated estimate here in a couple weeks, and then when we're moving into the construction document phase, having those drawings done by the end of the year. And then we hope to start this next phase of work. As I said, it's a phase, so there's a multi-phase approach to this. We hope to start construction in early 22 and complete in early 23, and then additional phases will continue after that. So happy to take any questions on that before we get to the last goal.
Madam Chair, would you remind us of what gets constructed in this phase?
Yes, so what's constructed in this phase is a felony-sized courtroom on the 5th floor of the Government Center, the jury assembly space, jury deliberation spaces, kind of the support spaces. To accomplish that, we're moving court administration down to the 4th floor and then reconfiguring the 4th floor. So essentially construction is going to be contained to the 4th and 5th floors of the Government Center for this phase.
Have to relocate any of that workforce to temporary locations?
We will. So corrections specifically that's located on the 4th floor, we will have to temporarily relocate them to accommodate construction.
Is a felony-sized courtroom the largest kind of courtroom?
It is. It accommodates a 12-person jury. So yes, it is the largest.
Tall ceilings.
Tall ceilings?
Tall ceilings, yeah.
Is that one of the requirements?
One of the reasons
It
why
is,
it's
yes.
got to go on 5th floor.
Correct. Other questions?
Is that just by convention that it has to have tall ceilings? Is that some kind of judicial mandate?
It's not a mandate, but there's design standards. So just like you might design a jail, there's certain design standards for designing a jail. There's certain design standards for designing a courtroom. So yes, there's things that we follow to make it appropriate.
It's the intimidation factor.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Huh.
So the last board priority that I'll provide an update on today is green initiatives. And I think that the important word here is continue. I want to make sure that you're aware that we have been doing a lot of green initiatives over the years, and we want to continue that work moving forward. So we're not starting from square one. So the scope of work is going to encompass the entire county. It's not just facilities and building operations. It's not just transportation. It's multiple different departments and divisions. So as you can see, the scope of work for this climate plan for Olmsted County is going to include all of these individual departments and divisions. And it is being sponsored by executive management team. So they've been involved in kind of the scope development for this work. The sponsors are Tony Hill and myself, and then policy analysis and communications is providing a lot of the support behind the scenes and will actually lead the inventory, which is the first phase of this work. And then, as I said, everyone is going to contribute. It's important for us to include everyone in the county in this.
Can we see the previous slide just for a second?
Yes.
We went through it really quickly. Just the previous one.
This one? Yeah. If you have questions specifically on the scope of work and who or what it's going to include, I'll get into it in more depth here in a little bit.
Thank you.
Yep. So as I said, continue green initiatives. We have been acting on a lot of these things, so we want to acknowledge that. So this diagram shows we have taken some action on some initiatives. We have prepared and we have planned. But the idea behind this is we'll do an inventory of everything that we've done to date to try and figure out where are we moving next. So obviously we'll continue this work and it will impact all residents. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but it gets to your point, Commissioner Cascaden, about where are we starting with all these different departments and divisions. So across the top, people, transportation, buildings and energy, waste and materials, natural resources. It's a pretty wide-ranging scope of work to be able to encompass all of this information. So where we're starting is inventory. We're going to inventory all this information. Some examples that we already do is under transportation, we did a motor pool study, and we looked at how we utilize our motor pool Is it appropriately sized? And then can we move to hybrid electric vehicles or electric vehicles in the future? Another example of transportation could be the sheriff's office. As I said, all departments are going to be part of this. The sheriff's office policy on taking home squads. It basically is saving a commuter trip into and out of the office, if you want to say that, on a daily basis. So when you think about greenhouse gas emissions, we want to try and capture as much of this as possible. Under buildings and energy, we do put white roofs on all of our buildings, so it helps with light reflectivity and reduces the urban heat island effect. And then some examples that we've talked about potentially is under natural resources is a program that's named Lawns to Legumes. So no, we're not going to plant soybeans or edible beans on our lawns, but it does look at different plantings instead of a bluegrass blend that you have to irrigate and mow frequently. Maybe there's other plantings you can put there that are more drought resistant and easier to maintain. So we're in phase one. The inventory is part of phase one. So on this roadmap, here we are in September. We plan to continue doing this inventory for the rest of the year. And then in December, be able to present that final inventory of what everyone is doing. And then next year, move into phase two. So phase two is going to be when we get into more of that planning and preparing once we have that accurate inventory. So we don't have any specific dates identified here, but being able to lay out this roadmap. So hopefully by the end of 2022, we have a more formal climate action plan and action steps for moving forward. And as I said, this is wide-reaching, so it does fit with a lot of the different missions that you have identified for the county. Be good stewards of our built and natural environment, provide operational excellence, and there's a lot of partners in this work. So I don't want to exclude our external partners and the other people that we're working with on this climate work. So some of those examples, the state of Minnesota actually has a climate change plan that we can reference. The Climate Smart Municipalities, I'm scheduled to leave for Germany at the end of this week to join the Climate Smart Municipalities delegation to Germany to learn about some of the climate action that is being taken in other countries. And then the city of Rochester, obviously, when we think about district energy planning, transitioning to building-based heating and cooling plants, we have a partnership there with the city of Rochester, and I think you'll be hearing about that from Lauren Jensen here after our presentation on some of the work that they've been doing on climate and sustainability planning. So happy to take any questions that you might have on this section.
Wow, thanks, man.
A lot.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, before you move off of this topic, I just want to highlight one more little piece for your knowledge, and that is that while Pete was overseeing general government until we reorganized, now we have a group, internal services, and you're seeing kind of part of the result of some more strategic marrying up and integration between and among all those departments that is led by Wilfredo. So I think you're seeing some nice results of that work, moving PRL over to physical development and making sure that the finance and HR are part of that internal services team. So just pointing that out.
Yeah, Madam Chair?
Yes?
The only thing that I would add to the report, but it probably doesn't come from building. It comes from someplace else when we're talking about climate and reduction of dangers to the climate, is that the long-term plan that we have for waste management and the possibility that we will be dealing with organics in the future, and that we will be reducing the amount of material that go into landfills, and the long-term projections that we have for the waste-to-energy plant to probably produce more electricity in the future, and how that can abate the climate issues. So I think that would probably maybe come from a different department, but my suggestion is that would be included somewhere in the long-term plans. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you for that. That's an impressive amount of thought and change and flexibility to adjust to our changing times. Thank you. And the City of Rochester Energy and Sustainability presentation. Who is?
Lauren Jensen was who we scheduled with.
Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, she sent me an, if that's the same person, she was on her way to Germany or Denmark or something to take part in something else, and I suggested when she gets back from that, she could call us and make her presentation then,
Yeah.
if I believe that's the same person.
Madam Chair, Matt Miller is going on that same trip.
Matt Miller is, yes, wonderful.
He's working on his German right now.
So,
Yeah, yeah,
Guten Tag.
okay.
so we reschedule that one.
Reschedule that one. So, we are moving on now to board and committee reports. Start with Commissioner Brown. Do you have any reports?
Nothing of note. Lots of committee meetings, but nothing raises to the level of worth
Okay,
reporting.
thank you. Commissioner Tyne?
Same.
Commissioner Flynn?
No, nothing to report.
Commissioner Cascaden?
I am sending around a couple things for you. This is, in our board packet today, we had a proclamation for Welcoming Week. And our staff has been doing a lot of work to create activities and events that commemorate Welcoming Week. Welcoming Week is part of a national movement from Welcoming America to welcome newcomers to communities and to fully include them. And so just wanted to give you two call outs of things that some of you had your pictures taken, and it's now on the website with the I'm a welcomer sign.
Commissioner Cascaden, I think you could take off your mask while you report.
Speaking?
It's
All right.
easier to hear you.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to call out is that this Sunday, there is a Welcoming Week Begins With Us celebration at 125 Live. As you will see, Olmsted County and the City of Rochester, a whole variety of organizations are participating in that. It's kind of a drop-in. You may want to join the group and see what's happening. There's just a lot of different activities during the week sponsored by different organizations. And then there's one here next Friday, the 17th, a week from Friday. And this is a citizenship celebration that the county and the city are operating. This is welcoming newly naturalized citizens, little celebration of their citizenship. Winona County has been doing this for some time, and it's become kind of a nice tradition. And Clara Cifuentes and others have been planning this event for our community, and you're invited to come to that as well. So these are, as we looked at the report today, and as we're looking at how we are incorporating diversity and inclusion into all of our goal setting, this is a little bit more forward facing into the broader community as events that indicate our commitment to being welcoming and inclusive communities. The only other thing I'd say is that several of us are going to the AMC Policy Conference next week, and we're already beginning to look at priorities for the legislative agenda. We welcomed Jennifer Berkman back last week, and we're beginning that work with staff and with the board. And I think that's it for today, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Wright?
I have no report, thank you.
Okay, I just wanted the board to know we did do our interviews with the Housing Department for the position of the Resident Advisory Board. The resident to be part of our HRA board, the resident position, and we did offer it to someone. A very good candidate. There were the interviews were impressive with people who wanted to do that. And I imagine we will hear from HRA whether that person has accepted that position. And that's my report. Commissioner Tyne, you had something?
I'll make a motion to appoint John Osborne to the Public Health
Oh, yes.
Advisory Board and Victoria Hennessey to the Extension Committee.
Second.
Any discussion about that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good, that happens. And I have my quote if I don't miss it here. Let's see. Here it is. I thought we could look at kindness this week. Unexpected kindness is the most powerful, least costly, and most underrated agent of human change. Unexpected kindness. Some stranger somewhere still remembers you. because you were once kind when no one else was. So, we can, I will take a motion to adjourn the board meeting, and we will follow this with the committee of the whole. I think we should take a 5-minute break in between. 10?
10 minutes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?